Hey everyone, it's Synthesizer back again with another video. Today I am continuing my series on sound design basics, and today I really wanted to talk about how to get started in sound design. Now, some of you have probably been creating music for a little while but are kind of unsure on how to create your own sounds, while others probably are just beginning, and I wanted to take some time and explain to you kind of the fundamentals of sound design and also just basically how to get started. I know it could be an overwhelming experience when you're opening your DAW for the first time or within the first few months and you're still just exploring things and you're not really sure what to do. And I highly recommend getting an understanding, at least a basic understanding of sound design. Now, why is it important? Well, there are many presets out there, obviously, that you could buy, and there's some for free that I give away as well. But if you don't have a basic understanding of how these presets work, it's going to be very difficult for you to create your own music in an effective manner. The reason why that is because no preset or sets of presets are going to be absolutely perfect for your song at all times. There are going to be many instances where having simple adjustments will make huge differences to your music, and it'll allow you to create the music you want much faster. Yes, we can search endlessly through presets and maybe come across them, but you'll end up spending a lot of money and, most importantly, way too much time trying to figure everything out. So hopefully this quick and simple guide will get you started, or at least give you some tips if you have started, and kind of get you on your way towards creating the sounds that you really want. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this whole series that I have, it's really based around the fundamentals of sound design in a lot of ways, and I break things down in a lot more detailed parts in other videos. However, this one I really wanted to just go broad and just get you started. So let's just get started here by talking about maybe your first experience with a synthesizer. Now, if you're new to FL Studio, you'll probably not see a lot of these synths here. I have a bunch that I bought and downloaded, but you should remember one important thing, and that is don't go out buying extra software before you're at least familiar with some of the basics. And the reason for that is you can spend hundreds of dollars and still not know how to create the right sounds, and I guarantee you that will put you off a lot quicker than if you spend a little time, and that could be, depending on how much time you have, that could be a week, few weeks, few months, whatever. Learn some of the basics of what you have already, then maybe go download something for free, and then start thinking about buying other software. The other important thing to remember when you're beginning any sound design is start thinking of the genres of music you like and what you want to create. The reason why that's important is not only that will get you towards a more focused goal, but you'll be able to search more effectively on YouTube, for example, for the types of sounds that you want to create and the types of music that you want to create. If you just say EDM, you want to make EDM sounds, you're going to have a tough time figuring out where to even look for the right sounds, like sound design tutorials or songwriting tutorials. Whereas if you drill in really more precisely, say you want synthwave or something like that, right? Or chill wave, or house music, at least that will get you started. You won't necessarily get every single artist that you want to see, but you'll start to think of the sounds you want and how those kind of come together within that genre. That way you can focus in more and start creating those sounds. Now today I'm going to keep it very general. So to get started, I'm going to open Vital here. And the reason why I'm using this is because it's a free synthesizer. It's a very powerful synthesizer, absolutely free. It's similar to Serum. It doesn't have quite the same effects, and I think Serum is a little bit better here and there, but it is almost identical to Serum in so many ways, and I'll show you why. So you might be opening this and thinking, what is all this? How does any of this work? Now I'm going to just play a sound here. This is a very basic sound, and you'll see here one of the fundamental aspects of every synthesizer is an oscillator. Every single synthesizer will have an oscillator or multiple oscillators that you can use. Now, what is an oscillator? Without getting into the theory, because this is not what this video is about, I want you to get going on your music quicker. So without getting to the theory, it's essentially the thing that creates the sound, okay? And the way that the basic sound comes out matters and depends on the wave shape. And what's special about Vital and other synthesizer like Serum is that they have wavetable synthesizers. So they are wavetable synthesizers. So that means that these wavetables can change over time. As you can see, I'm changing it here depending on the position. Now, sometimes you can select in this situation how to change it here. You can see in different spots, it will be a different wave shape here. However, I'm going to keep it simple. And what I'm going to do is here, just select a different wave shape. I'm going to go to basic shapes. Now, you'll notice that when I move this over here as well, once I close this, you'll see that these move, but they move more statically. They're not kind of morphing into each other. And that's because in this situation, we just want basic shapes. And what's a basic shape? Well, our typical basic shapes are this sine, which is a very kind of mellow sound. And its most fundamental frequency, I'm not going to explain that. I actually explained that in another video. Go check out my playlist on sound design basics where I go into all things sine wave. And then another basic shape here is triangle. Another one is the square. And another one is the saw. So as you can hear, all of these sounds have their unique characters, and those are what I would call like the four most fundamental sounds in all of sound design. There are some variations like the pulse wave, which is similar to the square. And of course, you could create absolutely unique and endless shapes through different synthesizers. In this case, you can create it as I showed you before, opening up these maps here. You can draw them in and play around with them. We're not going to do that today, but essentially this gives you options to change the shapes in any way you want them. And that, of course, will have a dramatic effect on the output of your sounds, because as you heard, this sound is much different than this sound. Same note. Same note here with the triangle, but all different outputs, right? Now you might be thinking, okay, that's nice, but how do we get to the sounds I want to make? Well, understanding those four shapes will go a very long way towards understanding all of music and all of EDM music across all genres. I can guarantee you, as you develop your ear, which will take a lot of time, as you develop your ear, you will hear these wave shapes in all sorts of sounds. I can guarantee you it won't take you too long to start understanding saw waves especially. Think about the early 2010s. If you're an EDM fan, the saw waves, like the super saw sounds, were so common and they're so easily identifiable. Now there's a lot more subtle sounds. However, with practice, I guarantee you will start to understand these sounds and how to shape the sounds you want. But you will not do that without understanding the basic shapes. You can also layer these sounds. And as you can hear, layering these sounds also gives them different characters and can fundamentally change things. You can change levels of them. You can change the pitch. All these things can be changed. And you'll notice in a lot of presets that they use multiple oscillators here to layer sounds on top of another. That's a very common technique. We're not going to get into that today. However, just know that this is an important step as well towards understanding how sounds work. A lot of combinations have become popular as well. And you'll notice things like the saw and the square, or sometimes even a sine and a saw, which are, in my opinion, kind of like polar opposites. They can work together through different combinations and different techniques. But to keep it simple, we're just going to keep it through this one oscillator, and we're going to just keep a saw here. Sorry, this is a triangle. We're going to keep this saw. Now you might be thinking, okay, this is kind of an annoying sound. Why is it so buzzy and abrasive. Well, the way to treat that is to turn on a filter. And why filters are important is because they allow us to what's called subtract the sound and allow us to do subtractive synthesis. Now, what does that mean? That just means that rather than having the full spectrum of sound here that this is created by the saw wave, we are taking out some of the highs, or we can also take out some of the lows if we were to switch around here and we would do a high pass filter. So you can hear the lows are taken out in this situation. The highs are taken out. Sorry there, I forgot that it's actually through this way, but every synthesizer will have filters that work in different ways. Regardless, over here, this is where we can control what's called the cutoff. You can hear that kind of what's called resonance. I'm not going to get into that, but it's kind of that kind of high-pitched annoying sound. So you can hear that fundamentally changes the sound, and of course, in a lot of ways you can automate these. So in a song, you can slowly bring this open or quickly, whatever you want, and that will change the sound fundamentally in so many ways. Very important for creating your sounds. The next thing I want to mention here is your envelopes. Now, envelopes are what shape the sound in their attack, decay, sustain, release. Now, over here, there's also a hold, and that is sometimes unique to certain synthesizers. We're not going to pay too much attention to that today, but the most important thing here, there's also a delay here. Again, we're not going to pay attention to that. We're going to pay attention to is the attack here. So let's see what happens when we move this. Can you hear the difference there of when I up the attack? You can see, the nice thing about Vital is you can actually see the path that the sound is taking. Over here is essentially the loudest point, and the attack is how long it takes to get to that loudest point. Over here is 0 seconds, so right away. Over here is, say, 2 seconds. So as you can imagine, this makes a difference. So if I'm wanting to create a pad sound, right? And a pad is kind of that bigger sound that fills out space. You don't want this necessarily, so you will up the attack a little bit. And that way you could create more kind of softer sounds, right? Rather than this, which allows what's called the transient to come through right away. And that gives you that kind of plucky sound almost, at least an initial pluck. To create a complete pluck, what you do is take down the sustain. And the sustain is essentially, if it's all the way up, it will stay at this full noise level the entire time. If we take it all the way down, it only briefly gets up to that full sound and then immediately dies down. And that is then controlled by the decay here. So the shorter the decay is kind of more of a plucky sound when your sustain is all the way down. As you can see, that is a pluck sound, right? Even if I hold it down here, it's still just plucky because the sustain is all the way down and decays down. I can also up the decay where it slowly goes down, or a nicer kind of so that's kind of like an in-between type of sound. Not quite a pad, but as you can imagine, it's got that nice kind of semi-sustained sound that allows it to have enough volume that it comes through, but it's not quite a pluck either. The last thing I want to talk about is this release. So it's going to be more apparent, say, if we take down this decay, we turn up the sustain a bit. So the release at this point is this. And as I release, there's no further sound. If I turn up the release, watch what happens when I release the keys. That's the amount of time from the sustain point to 0. That's how long it takes. So in terms of if I'm going to create some like key sounds here, you can hear that allows us to create more of a keys type of sound where it's releasing just that little bit at the end. One more thing I want to talk about with envelopes very simply, there's, as you can see, multiple envelopes. So why does that matter? So what you do with multiple envelopes, you have your first envelope, which is called the amp envelope, which controls the full amplitude of the sound, whereas this is essentially what's called a mod envelope, which is used to modulate the sound. So say I wanted to modulate, and that just means a fancy word for change, the amp envelope, or the kind of the sound that the amp is producing. So I would take my second envelope, and which is nice here in Vital and Serum, you can just drag it, and you drag it to this, and all of a sudden it's changing the sound while this is still the same, right? And it's what's called opening the cutoff filter. So I can actually take this back and I can modulate how much I want it to open each time I click this, versus if I were to what's called bypass. So bypassing it means just turning it off. As you can see, I didn't change envelope 1 at all, and it's all the way down here because it's all the way filtered. However, if I unbypass, I am opening it up again. And as you can imagine, that offers a lot more flexibility when it comes to the filters and how the envelopes kind of affect the sound in any way. And of course, the shape of the second envelope can change as well. As you can see, it quickly opens up that filter and then quickly decays because the sustain is down to 0, even though this envelope is unchanged. So essentially, having that second envelope or third envelope changes how things work with filters. And there are other ways envelopes can affect things, but just basically, as you can see, we are shaping sounds here with these envelopes. Similarly, LFOs are essentially what's called a low frequency oscillator. They are meant to shape your sounds even more. And to put it simply, they are really there to change the sound on a more subtle, sometimes very obvious, but generally speaking, it doesn't operate at the same frequency level. So you can take, say, a triangle here, a triangle shape. This is on, let's say, you can change the frequency of how often this triangle plays through. So let's just take this again, attach it to the filter as well. And it's on 1/4 note. So that means every full bar it plays 4 times. And as you can see, it moves the filter. Now we can of course change how much we get the filter moved. So we have the envelope modulating things and the LFO modulating things. Of course, you could get even more subtle with these things. And the envelope, with the LFO, which is cool, it can also change things in many different ways. So we can do something like take it and change the pitch of the sound, very subtly or very annoyingly. And then over here, going back to our oscillator, we can increase the voices of unison, which just means it makes it wider. And then we're going to decrease the detune. So we're going to change this envelope again. Sorry, I keep running out of space on my mini keyboard here. But as you can see, these things playing off each other, they're all working at the same time. They're all adding unique character here. And as you can see, this is a pad, but we have this plucky quality to it at the same time as the pad as well, which gives us that unique ability to open things up quickly while finding our home in a kind of lower frequency. The last thing I want to mention is effects. Almost every synthesizer has effects. Now, the most important thing is a lot of these effects on synthesizers are not as good as some of the dedicated effects you can buy out there. However, you still can use them very effectively and they can sound great. So don't ever let anybody tell you that you shouldn't ever use these. You absolutely should. You absolutely can. They work effectively in many ways. However, if you have your own effects that you want to play around with, please do. I'm going to use these effects here, so let's add some reverb here. It's pretty subtle here. Now I'm not going to go through all of these. I might add a little chorus as well. This is just affecting which frequencies are affected by the chorus. And of course, you can play around with a lot of these things, so you can add additional filters, some delay, compression, which is a whole other thing, and lots of other effects as well. The most important thing is, though, when you're creating these sounds and starting off, make sure you learn the basics of how all of these things work. And again, if you have not checked out my other videos on sound design basics, I encourage you to do so. I take you through more of the details of all these parts here, and I show you how to get to some of the sounds that you want to create, no matter what genre you are interested in. Once you get through those videos, I encourage you to then start to look at other videos that I've created talking about more advanced techniques in sound design and music production in general. And that way, you'll start to see and start to connect the dots on how these basic shapes that you're seeing and these basic techniques that you're saying can really get you to create the sounds you want. It will seem a little slow at first, but I can guarantee you it's not as steep of a learning curve as it seems. And if you don't have Vital, even though it's free, I encourage you to download it. If you don't want to, use whatever synthesizer you have. They all have different oscillators. Now I'm going to close this. I'll show you. I'm going to open up a very common one that a lot of people use, which is GMS. As you can see, they have all the same things. They might just look a little bit different. So I will open up this default thing here. As you can see, they have oscillators here, the wave shapes as we talked about. They have their filters here, the envelopes, the LFOs. They're all the same in a lot of ways. As you can see, you can increase the voices. As you can see, we're getting to a pad already, etc. So don't worry about having a certain specific synthesizer. Use whatever you have, no matter what program, whether you're FL Studio, Ableton, or whatever. Just use whatever synthesizer is available and just play around with things. Don't go spending money on expensive synthesizers before you understand at least some of the basics of how they work and when you can start creating some of the sounds that you want. If you find your synthesizer is still limited and you're not creating the sounds that you want, but you start to understand things, then that might be the time you should start spending a little bit more money and then explore that synthesizer to its fullest extent. Let me know down in the comments if you're a beginner or an intermediate, what you would like to see in terms of sound design videos. I'm always looking for suggestions, comments, and did you find this helpful? Where are you in your sound design journey? And what are some of the topics you would like covered on this channel? I'm always willing to provide more insight if I can. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.